welcome everybody to the celebration of One for the World donating its millionth dollar to highly effective charities. We are, as we can see in the chat, being joined by people from all around the world. We've got people from Abu Dhabi, we've got people from Colombia, we've got people from Australia. I'm in the UK, many of you dialing in from Canada or from the east or west coast of the States. And you're all very welcome with us as we celebrate what is a huge milestone for One for the World, and we hope the first of many milestones. And just to set the tone for this evening, I feel like this is a real celebration of what can happen when thousands of people come together and collectively take action on a problem that they are passionate about. So we only get to this milestone by having several thousand members who have taken lots and lots and lots of tiny steps, often donating, affordable amounts of money, but doing it again and again and again over a period of 6 years. And it's the culmination of all of those efforts that leads us to this fantastic milestone that we're celebrating tonight. And I think there's something really heartwarming and affirming about that, actually at a time when there's a lot of news about how divided we are and polarized, and how cooperation on big problems is not always where we'd like it to be. And yet One for the World is this fantastic example of what can happen when you get a group of people who are all passionate about the same thing and they all work together to try to do something about it. So you're very welcome as we celebrate this. I'm about to share my screen and we have a few slides to guide us through this evening, but the main purpose of tonight is for you to hear from some of the staff who are involved in One for the World, from the founders, and from our very special keynote speaker, Peter Singer, the world-renowned ethicist, and we're delighted to have him join us this evening. So at this point, I'm going to quickly share my screen. Okay, so this is the lineup for this evening. So you're going to hear from me to begin with. My name is Jack. I'm the Executive Director at One for the World, which means I have the absolute privilege of leading the full-time staff team and trying to direct our strategy along with the board. And you're going to hear from all of our staff this evening. We're a very small charity. We believe in lean charity. So Evan is waving at you at the moment. He's our Chief Operating Officer and our longest serving member of staff, who's done an enormous amount to bring us to this fantastic milestone that we're celebrating this evening. We've also got Kenan, who is our Director of Growth. Kenan, if you could give everybody a wave, that would be great as well. Well, I'll assume he's going to wave while I'm talking. And then you've got the question and answer with Peter Singer, and then to finish up, Kate and Josh, who are our co-founders. So I was reading recently in preparation for a webinar that we were doing with Will McCaskill, his excellent book, Doing Good Better. And I was particularly struck by this quotation, which has actually pretty quickly become a favorite of mine. And the reason that I love this quotation is that I think it really encapsulates something that's very important to One for the World, really at the heart of One for the World, which is extreme poverty can seem like this terrible, intractable problem. And for those of you who maybe aren't so familiar with what we mean by extreme poverty, what we mean by that is the people in the world who are living on the equivalent of less than $2 a day if they were living in the mainland United States. So if you live in the United States right now, or if you've ever visited there, imagine being in New York or San Francisco or DC or Boston or any of the cities in the US, and every single day you only have $1.90 for every expense that you have in your life. So that's your food, your healthcare, your transport, access to the internet, education, everything is in that $2 that you have per day. Now you're probably thinking, well, that is just not possible. It would not be possible for me to live like that. What would I have? I simply couldn't have anything. Well, that is the reality for people living in extreme poverty. That's why people live in houses that are cobbled together from scrap, and they don't have plumbing, and they don't have adequate toilets, and they have to choose between food and education and healthcare. Because when we're talking about people in extreme poverty, they truly, truly, truly have next to nothing to live on. And the thing about a problem like that is when you hear that there are nearly 700 million people who are living in extreme poverty, that can seem like a totally intractable problem that we can't do anything about. And I think we often hear from people who say, well, you know, of course, I think extreme poverty is terrible, but what can I do about it? You know, what can anyone do about a problem this large? Well, this is why I love this quotation, because although the size of the bucket is daunting, actually our responsibility is to think about the size of the drop that we can put into it. You know, no one on this call is in a position to donate enough money to truly end extreme poverty. They're just not able to do that. But if all of us do a little bit consistently over time, we can really, really, really make a difference. And you're going to hear today about the fantastic work of the charities that we support at One for the World, and also about the fantastic impact that our members have had over the first 6 years of One for the World being in existence. And so I feel like this rotation is very appropriate for tonight, because it's really a testament to how big the drop that we can make is when we bring together a movement of very passionate people. So tonight we're going to hear about the work of outstanding charities, the impact of the donations of our members, and we're going to hear from one of the world's leading philosophers and the inspiration behind One for the World, which is, of course, Peter Singer. But the first thing I want to do is say thank you to all of you who are currently One for the World members, or indeed pledge members who haven't started giving yet. You know, there are loads of organizations out there who specialize in other types of fundraising, whether that is high net worth fundraising, whether that's working with people who found companies to try to get them to give, or working with people who stand to inherit enormous amounts of money to try and divert that. And we applaud all of those organizations. They do fantastic work, and many of them are raising $50, $100, $150 million a year. But we believe passionately at One for the World that there is a need for an organization that actually targets mainstream audiences with the message of effective giving, which is why we aim for this incredibly affordable price point of just 1% of your income, because we believe that almost everybody in the developed world can contribute 1% of their income to the fight against extreme poverty. And if we all do that, the cumulative effect is enormous. So we have just donated our millionth dollar to effective charities. And just to give you some idea of how we got there, that's $1 million has been raised from over 1,500 unique donors, with another 2,000 who are waiting to come online at the moment. Those donors have been sourced from nearly 50 different universities. They span 4 countries, and the average amount that they're giving is just below $50 per month. And yet when you add up all of these people making that small commitment, small but meaningful commitment every month from 2014 to the present day, that's how you end up with $1 million being given to highly effective charities, and the sort of staggering impact that charities as effective as the ones that One for the World supports, the charities that effective can have a staggering impact with that amount of money. So at this point, I'd just like to pass over and play a quick video from our pledges who kindly recorded some words about why they're so passionate about giving to One for the World.
I took the One for the World pledge.
The reason that I signed the pledge,
I took the pledge.
I made the pledge.
I chose to pledge 1% of my future income to the world's most effective charities.
Because I'm really of the belief that we all have a very immense and unique opportunity to do a lot of good.
I saw that by donating what I consider to be extra spending money, malaria nets could be distributed, blindness could be prevented with vitamin A supplementation, lives could be saved, and suffering could be alleviated.
I believe that we have a moral obligation to help those who have fallen victim to poverty because of circumstances beyond their control, and I want to help change that.
Hi, everybody. My name is Evan McVille, and for those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I work as the COO at One for the World HQ. And quickly, before I dive in to talk about the incredible work that our partner charities have done and are doing, I did just want to note how wild it is that almost 3 years ago to the day, I was sitting in the law school cafe at Villanova University, where I went to undergrad, talking to Josh McCann, one of the co-founders of One for the World, who who you will hear from later, and Nadav Steinmetz, the founder of the Columbia chapter, about how Peter Singer's work and writing had changed our lives, and about the possibility of opening the third ever undergrad chapter in One for the World. And fast forward 3 years, I have the privilege and honor of being a part of an event with Professor Singer and being a part of the full-time team that supports the more than 75 chapters, active One for the World chapters worldwide. Okay, nostalgia aside, I'm here to talk about the incredible work that our partner charities have done in the past 6 years. And I think it would be good for us to take a quick look at one of the problems that the charities that we're supporting are up against. And we will do that by taking a quick pop quiz. So there should be a poll up, and your job is to guess which animal kills the most humans each year. And I'll give everyone a couple of seconds to think and to answer. Okay, voting is slowing, and unsurprisingly, at a One for the World event, many of you know that mosquitoes are in fact the world's deadliest animal. And the mosquito is the world's deadliest animal. And here are the top 5. The mosquito is the world's deadliest animal because it is the biggest vector for transmission for the deadliest disease in the world for children under 5 and pregnant women, which is malaria. And the young man in this picture is actually recovering from malaria, thank goodness, but not everyone is so lucky. Malaria does kill more than 400,000 people each year, mostly young children under the age of 5. As if that wasn't enough, it does infect another 230 million people a year and leads to more than $12 billion in economic loss. And not at all to minimize the pain or the suffering that has resulted from the COVID-19 pandemic, but to provide what I think is a relevant comparison. Based on the CDC's figures as of this morning, 40 children under the age of 4 have lost their lives as the result of the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States. And in that same time frame, more than 200,000 children under 5 have died from malaria in sub-Saharan Africa. And again, I do not want to minimize the suffering of the children and the parents that have been affected by COVID-19, but I do want to note that malaria has been completely devastating communities and families for decades in a way that we in high-income countries are only now starting to appreciate. One of the most exciting but also frustrating things about malaria is that unlike COVID and other deadly diseases, we have incredibly reliable and inexpensive ways to prevent and treat malaria. And one of those interventions is LLINs, or long-lasting insecticidal gnats. And through numerous randomized control trials and meta-studies, it has been shown that sleeping under one of these nets is the most effective way to prevent the contraction of malaria. And I know a lot of you are saying, great, Evan, you found a terrible problem, but it is preventable with a cheap and dependable solution. But obviously, I'm not suited to manufacture and distribute these life-saving nets, which is exactly where our charity partner, AMF, comes in. Against Malaria Foundation does one thing, and they do it really, really, really well. They purchase and distribute long-lasting insecticidal nets. As of November 2020, this month, our partners at AMF are able to purchase and then distribute these nets to people living in high-risk areas for approximately $4.50 per net, which I think is just amazing. Meaning that we have the opportunity to protect people from one of the deadliest diseases in the world for less than a venti pumpkin spice latte. And to be clear, I have absolutely nothing against venti pumpkin spice lattes. I actually had my first one last week and I thought it was delicious. All I am saying is that if you gave me a choice between a couple pumpkin spice lattes each week versus making coffee at home and then donating those saved dollars to protecting dozens of people from malaria each week, I'm going with the nets. Sorry, Howard. AMF is widely considered to be one of the, if not the, most efficient, transparent, and effective charities on the planet, which is why I am thrilled that our donors have given more than $190,000 to AMF in the last 6 years, so AMF can protect children like blessings and precious. This is Florence. She is a 32-year-old mother of two 6-year-old daughters, or excuse me, 6-month-old daughters, Blessings and Precious, pictured here. They live in Kenya, and because of the work that AMF has done, children like Blessings and Precious who live in high malaria risk areas will have much, much better chances of not contracting malaria and reaching their 5th birthday. Preventing just these two children, Blessings and Precious, from contracting malaria is an accomplishment enough worth celebrating, in my opinion. And I do worry sometimes that when we start talking about the astronomical numbers and the impact that One for the World has had, we can get a little lost. But I hope that this zoom out will put into perspective why we are celebrating tonight, because it's not just Blessings and Precious that One for the World donors have protected from malaria through AMF. It's the over 62,000 people that have been protected, which makes tonight such a cause for celebration. Now is also a good time to remember that AMF is just one of the more than a dozen ultra-effective charities that One for the World donors support. They are all doing truly amazing, amazing work to help the world's most vulnerable people. And one of those charities is Give Directly, which has been, like the Against Malaria Foundation, a part of our portfolio since our inception, which provides unconditional cash transfers to some of the world's most vulnerable people. In this next video, there's a story of Jacqueline, a woman whose life was changed as the result of donations like the ones our One for the World members make to Give Directly each month.
My name is Jacqueline Okoch Osodo, and I'm just a farmer, a peasant farmer. My husband is a charcoal burner. At first, we were in Nairobi. He got sick, then we came back at 2008. We settled until 2012. Then he decided to go back because I was still just struggling the way I was struggling at first. He wasn't sending money. He was just telling me that the job is not good, So I decided to tell him that come back, because people will think that you are at Nairobi, I'm feeling good, but I'm not feeling good. So just come back, burn your charcoal the way you used to do at first. My children are also happy because their father is around. They can see him anytime they want him. Before Give Directly, I was depending on my husband too much. So you know that brings conflicts in a house when you depend even a sort of 10 bob. So when the Give Directly came, I just knew that I'm also a wife and I have children. They need to eat, they need to do. So I'm seeing so much change. In fact, when Give Directly came, I see we are now in love, so much love, because I contribute, he contributes, because sharing. So the love is so much. We love each other.
That's not the same.
Yeah. I was digging with my own hands, my own energy. But now when the Give Directly came, I could now hire even a tractor so that it can farm for me. So I don't use more energy. I have a home through Give Directly. I got my money, then I bought iron sheets. My son is in secondary school. I'm now able to pay fee. I have goats, and I still hope for so many things because I haven't built a big house. It's just a small one, and I have hope that I'll build.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, and I hope you enjoyed hearing that wonderful story from our Give Directly recipients. My name is Kenan McClung. I'm One for the World's Director of Growth. I first started working with the Columbia chapter 3 years ago, and I'm proud to be joined tonight by many members who have been part of One for the World for twice that time, and as well by many others who would like to join our movement. So the early scale of our organization reflects its humble origins. 2 graduate students with an idea rooted in a class assignment. But as those first teams of volunteers and donors spread the message of the historic opportunity we have to make the world a measurably better place, students at universities across the world answered. Over the past 6 years, One for the World has grown from a handful of chapters concentrated in the northeastern United States to more than 75 chapters operating in 4 countries, spanning 3 continents. Ours has become a global movement. And as that movement has grown, so has our ability to affect the lives of people who are truly suffering. As of October 2020, One for the World members have protected 60,000 people with anti-malarial bed nets, dewormed 120,000 children, helped prevent early childhood blindness in 16,000 children, transferred $100,000 directly to people in need, and given 7,000 children the treatment they need to avoid contracting malaria. And ultimately, our members have saved the lives of an estimated 123 people who would otherwise not be with us today. And while that sounds impressive, I often find that it can feel a little abstract. So we've gathered stories from more recipients like the one we just saw. Thanks to the support of our members, entrepreneurs have been able to build their businesses. Parents have been able to feed their children. Families have been able to keep their homes. But as I reflect with deep gratitude on the difference that you all have made, my thoughts turn to the numbers that don't appear on these slides. The millions of people whom we weren't able to reach. The children who never got a chance to wonder what the world might have in store for them. The parents who never got the chance to watch them wonder. And so, as we celebrate our first $1 million moved, we look ahead to the next $1 million. Our staff, our volunteers, and our donors are determined to continue this work until extreme poverty is no longer a problem for the great thinkers of our day to consider, but one for our children to read of in their history classes. So thank you very much for being with us tonight. Thank you very much for being with us as long as you have, or for considering joining us. And now we'll hear from one of our partner charities, Project Healthy Children, about their Sanku food fortification program.
Ni biashara yangu ya barabarani ni ile, na sana sana na kilimo na ufugaji. Hizi shughuli zinasaidia kwanza mwenyewe na kuwasomesha watoto, yaani ndio kama ofisi yangu. Changamoto nyingi. Kwanza hii hali imenipata nikiwa mdogo. Nikawa nalima huko, nilima matikiti. Nikauza, nikanunua kilo cha kwanza. Wateja wangu wa unga, wengine wa madukani hapo, na wengine wa kupita, na wengine wako mashambani huko. Huko mbele hakuna chakula. Wa Masai, yani wateja wangu wakubwa na Masai. Najisikia vizuri kwa sababu kwanza nao wanakuwa wameongezewa kitu fulani kwenye mahindi yao waliyoleta pale. Sasa mtoto akiwa anakuwa na uhai gani? Mtoto mwenye afya njema anakuwa yani yuko vizuri. Anakuwa anapambana hata kwa lolote lile, hata malazi mengine yanakuwa tofauti. Kilimo ni kutoza utafutaji.
Fantastic stuff there from yet another one of the highly effective charities that we support. And I'm delighted at this point to welcome, I think probably the reason why a record number of people have joined this webinar, which is that we are joined by Peter Singer. I don't even really know if he needs that much introduction, but one of the world's leading philosophers, a leading bioethicist, someone whose career has been incredibly influential through his writings and activism, And so we're absolutely delighted to have him here, particularly as he was really the inspiration for One for the World in the first place. So Peter, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Jack. And I'm delighted to be with you too and to see the progress that One for the World has been making.
Fantastic. Well, I wanted to start off with a question that I expect you get a lot, but it seems very relevant this evening, which is just, why should people give to try to end global poverty?
Well, in one sense, you've answered that question, right? You've shown the children who are alive because of people giving. You've shown the people whose lives are so much better, who are able to have a little house with a tin roof, who are able to live with their husband together rather than have him in a city. So one reason is just that these are good things. I think pretty much any normal person will recognize that it's good that children don't die prematurely. It's good that people have better lives, that they don't suffer. And that's really the ultimate reason. But if you do want to take it back to the kind of what's in it for me question, that some of those discussions head in that direction, and I don't think we should be ashamed of saying that there is something in it for us, and that is that it gives meaning and purpose and fulfillment to our lives. That rather than simply trying to find satisfaction through consuming more goods, through having that venti pumpkin spice or whatever it was, which will probably pall after a while, even if you enjoy the first one. So you get something that is deeper and richer, and that gives real meaning in your life and makes you feel, I have done something worthwhile. I've been one of a group which together has saved people's lives, given people better quality of life, reduced suffering. And that's just worth doing. I mean, this thing that you have up behind you on the screen, ever saved a life, right? I had a student who said that the way he thought of it was, he imagined that one day he was walking down a street and there was a building on fire, and he kicked down the door and pulled a child out of there and saved that child's life. Now, he would be a hero and he would feel, wow, he'd really done something good today. Maybe something that would last his whole life, the feeling that he'd saved that child. Well, you don't have to risk your life in a burning building to save someone else's life. And you should feel just as good about it, because the lives that you're saving through your contributions to One for the World are just as important.
Fantastic. And I'm sure that will resonate with people who are already One for the World pledges, or indeed Giving What We Can pledges, and so have taken a pledge to give already. I think probably one of the most famous writings that you have produced was a thought experiment called the Drowning Child experiment. And I wonder if you could run through that for the audience and also tell us what the implications are, particularly for the idea of giving locally, which is something we hear about a lot when we're doing outreach, that people want to give locally before they give abroad.
Right. So this is something that I wrote many years ago in an article called Famine, Affluence and Morality. I asked readers to imagine that they're walking across a park and passing by a shallow pond. And you know that the pond is shallow because in summer you see kids playing in it, and on teenagers it's only waist deep. In you it would only be waist deep at most. But it's not summer now, and you don't expect to see anybody playing in the pond. But when you do casually glance at the pond, you notice that there is something flailing around in the pond, and you look more closely and you see that it's a small child, not a teenager, just a toddler, who obviously can't stand and seems to be in great danger of drowning in front of your eyes. So what do? I suppose the first thing you would do is to say, who's looking after this child? This child's too small to be alone in the park. There must be somebody, parents, babysitters. But you look around and there's nobody there. You don't know why. There's really only you and the child. So your next thought probably, I hope, is I better run down, jump into the pond and pull out that child, because otherwise the child is likely to drown. But then you have a less noble thought, and that is, today you're wearing your really best clothing because you're going somewhere important. It's quite expensive. It's not going to stand up to jumping in muddy water. It's going to get ruined. You'll have to replace it. And after all, the child isn't your responsibility, is it? It's not your child. It's not as if somebody said, would you look after this child for a moment while I go to the toilet or anything like that? You've never seen this child before. So what about just forgetting that you've seen the child and walking on so that you don't ruin your clothes? And that's a question that I put to my readers in the original article, and I've put to many audiences since. And unanimously, or virtually unanimously, they say that would be a terrible thing to do. That would be just awful, to put your clothes ahead of saving a child's life. You really ought to be saving the child's life. How could you live with yourself if you didn't do that? And I think that's the right reaction. But I then point out that even if there isn't a child drowning in front of you, there are children dying in the world right now whose lives you could save. And you've just given examples of that by donating to the Against Malaria Foundation, and so they get bed nets to sleep under and don't get malaria, or by donating to Sankyu so that they get micronutrients and they don't die of diseases or have stunted lives because of the lack of that. So if you're not doing something to save those children's lives, is that really so different from not saving the child in the pond because you didn't want to be put to the expense of buying new clothes? You asked the question, what does this say about giving locally rather than giving in low-income countries? And I think the way people respond to the child in the pond example, to say that that's a terrible thing to do, not to save the child, is that strong intuition we have that if there's someone there needing your help in front of you and you can easily give your help and there's no great costs, we really ought to be doing that. And you really can't say that you're an ethical person if you're not doing that. But when we don't see the people in front of us, particularly when they're on the other side of the world and we don't even really know who they are, so we know that donations to Against Malaria Foundation or the Malaria Consortium save lives, but we'll never really know exactly whose life was saved by those bed nets or the treatment. So then we're not as intuitively compelled to give. And I think that's because we've evolved in small face-to-face societies where we built up a intuitive response to helping people in need as part of our group. But we never built that up for distant strangers because that world didn't exist until recently when we could do that. So I think, what it suggests is that really we should think that the lives of people close and people far are just as important. We shouldn't say only the lives of people close to us matter. And we should try to develop a sense of we ought to be helping people elsewhere as well. And this is a good thing. And as I said, this is a meaningful and fulfilling thing that we can do to save lives. We shouldn't just be focusing on the lives we can save when the people whose lives they are right in front of us.
And it's so interesting to me that that analogy, which is fairly simple, has had such a profound impact in just changing people's thinking. I think because of the sort of inescapable moral conclusions that you just laid out. And even now, this is an important part of One for the World's outreach because we find that that analogy cuts through to people in a way that many more abstract arguments about morality would not. I think you've made the case really eloquently for why we have an obligation to give if we can. Could you talk now a bit about the effectiveness of different charitable gifts that we can make and what the approximate difference is between the least and most effective charitable donations?
Well, if you really mean the least effective, since I suppose they're not doing anything, the difference is infinite. But let's not talk about them, right? There are a small number of charities that are completely ineffective or even fraudulent. But if people give to the major well-known charities, it's going to be doing some good. But what people don't realize is that the ratio of how much good it does can vary dramatically. And here's an example that I use. I think it may originally come from Will McCaskill, who you quoted earlier. Think about giving to a charity that trains guide dogs. So that's a good thing to do, isn't it? It's good that people who are blind can have a guide dog to get them around. I'm sure you've seen people being assisted by guide dogs. so it's no sense that that's a fraudulent charity. It's using the money you donate to do something good. But how much does it cost to train a guide dog? Estimates currently in countries like the United States are in the range of $40,000 to $50,000 to train one guide dog and, of course, the blind person to work together to be useful. Okay, now compare that with an organization that is preventing blindness in some way or other. You gave the example of the Helen Keller Foundation, which is preventing blindness through vitamin A usage. And there are others like organizations like the Fred Hollows Foundation and SIVA that prevent blindness in various ways. Some of them may do cataract operations on people who's blind for that reason. Others may treat people who have a microorganism that causes blindness in many countries. Now, some of these organizations, Fred Hollows, for example, says it can prevent blindness for $25. Let's say that that's not the average, that it's a little bit exaggerated. Let's, just to be really conservative, say it costs $100 to prevent a case of blindness. So we can spend $40,000, take the lower figure, on preventing, on getting a guide dog for someone who's blind, or we can spend $100 on preventing blindness. And I think anyone would agree that it's better to prevent somebody being blind at all than to have somebody who's blind and give them a guide dog. I think people who are blind would prefer to be able to see again than just to have a guide dog. Let's say, just for the sake of doing some maths, it's twice as good to be able to see as to be blind but to have a guide dog. Then on those figures I gave you, 400 times $100 to get 40,000, and twice as good. So it's 800 times as good to give to one of those organizations that is preventing blindness or restoring sight in people who are blind, as it is to give to the guide dogs, which, as I said, is a good organization. So it's not difficult to, by being careful about doing some research and checking the impact of your organization, it's not difficult to do 800 times as much good by redirecting your dollars from a charity that you might impulsively give to a charity that you've done a little bit of research, looked online, or looked at one of those websites like thelifeyoucansave.org or givewell.org that recommend the most cost-effective charities.
And I think you've also very eloquently there talked about something important, which is we are in the unenviable position of having to weigh different things that are good. Many charitable causes are good. Many charitable donations that we can make are good, but we have a finite number of resources. And so it is important for us to try to find simply the most effective ones. Now, we're joined by a lot of people on this call from the effective altruism community. And as I'm sure you're aware, effective altruism straddles many cause areas, including global health and poverty. And so I wondered if you could talk about how you weigh the demands of different cause areas, some of which are more immediate, so things like global health and poverty, and some of which are less immediate. So I'm thinking about things like climate change, the risk from unaligned artificial intelligence, nuclear war, etc., and how you think about weighing those different cause areas.
Well, the framework by which I think about weighing them is to try to estimate how much good you're doing and discount it by the probabilities that you will or will not make a difference in this area. And when we compare things like global health and poverty with things like climate change, the ones you mentioned, or artificial general intelligence that's not aligned to our values, or nuclear war, what we're talking about are, in the latter cases, are probabilities that we'll be able to make some difference. Probabilities, firstly, that this will happen. It may be that, you know, if we don't do anything, we won't have a nuclear war, fortunately. But we have to think about what's the difference that by working on that issue or by contributing to an organization that's trying to prevent nuclear war, I can reduce the chances of nuclear war, or I can reduce the chances of artificial general intelligence taking us over and destroying the species, causing us to become extinct. or of climate change having catastrophic consequences. And then, so those are probabilities, and I'd say the probabilities that we can make differences are quite small, whereas in the case of global health and poverty, the probabilities that we can make differences are very high. As you've shown already, the differences that you've made, I think that figure was 123 lives that members of One for the World have already saved, plus, of course, great reductions of suffering in many other cases. You said casually when talking about malaria, for example, that it's not just the lives saved, but the cases of malaria prevented. I happened to get malaria myself when I was a lot younger, when I was in New Guinea. It's pretty nasty, even if you've got good drugs and good treatment. And I'm sure for people who don't, it's a lot nastier still, and it hangs around for quite a long time. So, there's a lot of things that you can be quite confident that you've actually done. So, although these other issues are much larger, you need to have some sense of what are the probabilities that you can make a difference. And I think partly it's psychological. A lot of people want to know that they have done something good. It's not enough to say, yes, there's a chance, put a lot of zeros under it. It's one in a large number, but there is a chance that I've prevented nuclear war. Some people will find that very satisfying. Other people will say, oh, look, those odds are so small that I made that difference. It doesn't mean as much to me. So there's partly that psychological factor of, are you the kind of person who's going to do this? And then the other thing is, are there already enough other people working on this? Is it important to have more people working on it? In the case of the risk of artificial general intelligence posing a threat to our species, I think it's important that there should be some very good people, well briefed in this area, understanding the issues, working on it. But I'm not sure that at this stage it really helps to have a lot more people working on it. It's not clear to me that numbers are going to make a difference here. So I'm glad that people are thinking about this issue. That's important. I'm glad that people are thinking about all of those issues. Climate change is perhaps a slightly different issue in that we can make some difference ourselves, perhaps. Politically, we can be active citizens, not so much, I think, a matter of giving to charities, but maybe supporting political groups that are trying to do something about climate change. So that might be a somewhat different issue. And I'm in addition to supporting causes relating to global poverty and health, I'm more likely to donate to climate change of the other issues that you mentioned than to those ones, because I do feel that this is something that needs to be done now and that we can still contribute to, and that there's clearly not enough being done, and I'm less sure about that with the other causes.
Great, thank you. I am conscious we could keep asking you questions for hours, because there are so many things that we would like to pick your brain on, but I am conscious of time. And I wonder, as a final question, if I could ask you just to summarize why you think that organizations like One for the World, and also the Life You Can Save, your own organization, why these organizations which try to bring the message of effective giving to a mainstream audience are important.
Well, I think it's really important that the effective altruism movement reaches more people, that it's still something of a niche movement and is not well known by the mainstream. So I think it's very important to draw more people in to this movement, both because the more people you have, the more resources can go to the issues that we've been talking about, global poverty and health-related issues for people in extreme poverty, but also because if people start thinking about effective altruism, and if the arguments for some of these other causes are good, as I believe they are, like doing something about artificial intelligence to make sure it's aligned with our values, or preventing nuclear war or climate change, I think then some people of that large group that we draw in, it's as if we're casting a wide net, we're drawing many people in. Many of them will stay with the global poverty and health issues that attracted them in the first place, but some of them will shift over to the other issues as they evaluate the arguments that these are also very much worthwhile things to do. So I think it's going to benefit all of the causes if we regard what we're doing as going mainstream and getting people to think more about the effectiveness of what they're doing, to think really about their lives, about what is it they want to do with their lives, about do they want to feel that they've done something worthwhile with their lives. And I think there's a huge reservoir of people out there who would like to feel they've done something worthwhile with their lives, and perhaps are hesitating to do the kinds of things that you've been talking about because they don't yet realize how much they can do for relatively small sums. And if we can get that message across, I think it's possible that effective altruism will become much more mainstream. But it will, if it does, it will become more mainstream because of these focuses on things like global poverty and health. And I haven't talked about animal welfare. That's another issue, of course, that I've worked on throughout my life. I think there are vast quantities of animal suffering in factory farms, and I think there are a lot of people who can relate to that and respond to that, and also come into the effective altruism movement because of that. But I think it's much more likely those, if you like, present concerns about suffering and premature death now that will help effective altruism to become mainstream, rather than future concerns like the threat of non-aligned artificial intelligence.
Well, we agree with you, and we're looking forward, we hope, to raising our second $1 million even quicker than we raised our first. But for now, Professor Singer, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. And I should say to the audience, the Life You Can Save have kindly made available a download link. So for anyone who wants to read The Life You Can Save, which is the book that ultimately inspired One for the World, to begin with, you will all get a download link to either listen to it as an audiobook or to read it in your inbox tomorrow morning. But for now, Professor Singer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Jack. It's been great to be part of your meeting, and congratulations again on the $1 million you raised. And I look forward to being back with you when you've raised the second $1 million.
Fantastic. Hopefully sooner rather than later. And don't, for those of you who have joined the call, don't rush off, because we just have one final thing, which is we would like to give the call over to Josh McCann and Kate Epstein, our founders, who are going to talk a little bit about the journey that One for the World has been on and how you can get involved.
Thank you very much, Jack, and thank you very much, Professor Singer. We're very excited to have you here with us today. Kate and I started One for the World when we were students. It was a simple idea. We thought that giving with confidence to effective organisations with measurable impacts as part of communities that we were already in place, we thought this would resonate. But at the same time, we had no idea what would become of it.
I guess that's my cue. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight at all hours of the night and day all over the world. We are so grateful to all of our supporters and donors, students, young professionals, parents, teachers, friends. It's great to see everyone here, especially some folks who have been with us from the very beginning. So thank you all. We're super grateful. And one point that I wanted to circle back to was one that Peter made of how this actually brings a lot of meaning and what's in it for us. So not only are we doing a lot of good for the world, but this is a way to really work your 9-to-5 job or be a student or be retired, do whatever you're doing in your life, but still feel like you are doing something great for the world. And so just, I think that that's what One for the World has given me. It's a luxury and it's a blessing, and just wanted to touch on that again. So tonight I'm here to close up shop and also to ask for two things. The first thing I'd like to ask for is, I think it would be great if everyone could leave here tonight thinking about how they're going to work this into conversations with friends and family over Thanksgiving, over the holiday time, and how to work that into conversation. And so I've been doing this myself lately, wanted to share one or two things that have worked well for me. Sometimes I'll just ask for this as a birthday present. My mom's on the call tonight. She asked me what I wanted for my birthday, and after considering a sweater, I decided just donate to One for the World. That's easier, and I probably would like that better. So that's one thing that I've done. I've also worked it into job interviews. I've worked it into hypothetical. What would you do with if you got $50 million tomorrow with coworkers? It's a fun topic floating around what we would do with our money, and I talk about, oh, I would give it to charity. And I think it's a fun topic to talk about, and I think there's creative ways of working it in. So I would encourage everyone to try to do that and have some conversations to see who else picks up on this idea. As Peter mentioned, it is still a niche idea. A lot of folks aren't familiar with it. And so as ambassadors of the brand, it would be great for you to think about that. The second ask before I turn it over to Josh is for everyone on the phone, if you haven't donated already, to consider donating it or put it on your to-do list, or even do it tonight and get it off your to-do list. So donate if you haven't already. And then if you have been donating with us since day one and you're well on in your career and progressing year after year, making more and more money with incremental raises, think about increasing your donation to really be the 1%, the full 1%. As an added bonus, actually, we have a private donor who has generously agreed to match donations, incremental donations through the end of the year. So your money will be matched, which is a tremendous opportunity, really unique. So if this wasn't already a good bang for your buck, you are doubling that. So those are my two asks. We have in the chat box the link to the donation, so you can get that off your to-do list tonight. And with that, I will hand it back over to Josh.
Thanks, Kate. So, you know, one great thing about the passage of time, obviously, is your wage increasing. And for those of you who are still in college, just trust me on the fact that pay rise day is like amongst the very best days. So for those of you who are fortunate enough that you've had your income rise over the last couple of years, we'd love to see that reflected in your donations. And I mean, I think we're extremely grateful to have Peter Singer here this evening. We were directly inspired by Peter Singer's work to start One for the World, but it's the decisions by individuals that have joined the webinar this evening that have made the organisation, and it's you deciding to make an individual decision to donate that has the ability to transform people's lives. And you can make a small decision, and as a result, children will live into adulthood. It's an individual choice, and you can action it and have a very real and meaningful impact on our world, and that's really, really cool. And you obviously you're doing this too without having any meaningful impact on your own lifestyle. And I don't think anyone has ever regretted their donation to One for the World. But for those of you who have been donating over the last 6 years, we're really excited to be here, and we're so grateful for your support. So thank you so much. We're just getting started. We have, on the back of your donations, built a platform that we're extremely committed to mainstreaming effective charities amongst the broader population. And we cannot wait to be back here very shortly to have a conversation about our first $100 million raise rather than our first $1 million raise. So thank you very much for your support thus far, and we look forward to seeing you all very shortly.
Thanks so much, Josh. So guys, we just have one final thing left to show you, and I think it's fitting that we're going to end by concentrating on the charities that we support, because ultimately One for the World is simply a vehicle to try to help you support the most effective charities working in global health and poverty. So we have one final video for you before we wrap up.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
I'm Ellie Hassenfeld, GiveWell's co-founder and CEO.
Hello, my name is Wendy Harrison, and I have the privilege of leading the team at the SCI Foundation.
Hi, my name is Olatunde Adesoro. I'm a senior project manager with Malaria Consortium.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for your support through One for the World.
Thank you for being a One for the World member and for relying on GiveWell's research to decide where to give.
Thank you for donating to our seasonal malaria chemo prevention program.
I would like to thank everyone involved with One for the World who has contributed to that initiative that has helped us, Sanku Project Healthy Children, continue our mission.
Over the last 20 years, our team has been focused on ending the devastating suffering caused by preventable diseases, such as schistosomiasis and soil-transmitted helminths, that affect some of the most marginalized and underserved communities in the world, with the ultimate aim of allowing everyone, everywhere, to be able to fulfill their own potential.
We have two goals: reach a lot of people and do it very cheaply. And for under $1 a year, you can guarantee that every meal consumed by a person contains these life-saving nutrients.
The SMC program is a highly effective intervention to provide children, particularly under 5, with anti-malaria drugs.
Last year, donors like you gave more than $100 million to GiveWell's recommendations, and we estimate that these funds will save more than 30,000 lives around the world.
Thanks to donations like yours, in 2020 alone, we hope to reach around 12 million children in the Sahel region in Africa.
So please keep supporting us, supporting all the great organizations that One for the World supports. Together we can end malnutrition in Africa.
Thank you also for joining a small but growing community of donors who prioritize impact above all else in their giving. Thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it.
Good.
Yeah, so just to edit, to echo, I should say, our wonderful charities there. We really do appreciate your support. That's all from us this evening. I'm just launching a poll now, which will give you the chance to let us know if you would like to increase your pledge or if you'd like to take the pledge for the first time, and we will follow up with you if that is the case. But aside from that, thank you so much for being with us as we celebrate donating $1 million to the most effective charities in the world. And we look forward to being back with you celebrating our next million extremely soon. So thank you so much for coming. And we really appreciate both your time and your financial support. Thanks, everyone.